Hello, my deathy friends. It is time again for an episode of Celebrity Death Roulette, the Wheel of Misfortune. And as you know, if you've watched any of the others, there are 10 names, random names. I don't know what they are. Troy put them together randomly. I have 2 minutes to talk about each of them. If I can, I'll try. Because some people are really obscure. All of these are from findadeath.com. If you check that out, www.findadeath.com, the celebrity death website that's been around since 1998. And all of these stories originated from there. So this is Celebrity Death Roulette number 8. And 10 names, 2 minutes. That's all I get. It cuts off strictly at 2 minutes. So let's go. Frances Bavier. So I couldn't tell you another thing that she was in aside from the Andy Griffith show. I know that she was quite beautiful, actually, because there was a photograph going on around her. She played Aunt Bee, who was the sort of matronly housekeeper of Andy Griffith or Andy Taylor and Opie Taylor. And she was quite beautiful. There was a picture floating around a couple of years ago of her when she was young, and nobody knew who it was because she looked like a model actually, and everyone knows her as this sort of stocky woman who always had words of advice, a little judgmental, but with a wink in her eye. And she, after the Andy Griffith show left, she moved to, I think it was Schuyler, North Carolina. And she kind of retreated from the public eye. In fact, she kind of retreated, period. I know that she owned a Studebaker. I don't think that people knew her. I think they knew she lived there, but I don't think that they felt comfortable approaching her. I know that Andy Griffith went to visit her one time, and they say he knocked on her door. Because Siler City, I believe, is the inspiration for Mayberry. And she kind of went hi and shut the door on him or something to that effect. It was not a warm and friendly reunion. But then I've heard that Andy Griffith wasn't a very warm and friendly person anyway. But she passed away in her house. I know when they went into her house, she was a hoarder because it was filled. She said there was like a bathtub just filled with cat feces. And in her garage, the Studebaker was there on all 4 flat tires. And I do believe she's buried in Schuyler City, I think it's called, in North Carolina. And I'm trying to think if there was something else about Aunt Bee I can tell you about. But she was. It's hard to name another thing she was in. A lot of those 60s actresses, like Sandra Gould or Kathleen Freeman, you saw them in a million things, but I can't tell you another thing that Frances. Davy Jones. Don't call me Davy. David Jones was British. I don't think he was real Cockney. I don't think he was from London, East London, but he was British, and he became famous in London for playing the Artful Dodger in the original production of Oliver, and I think it was Ron, what's his face, as Fagin, who played him in the movie. I'm not sure about the explanation of that. But anyway, Davy Jones was actually a professional jockey as well. And maybe that's what brought him to America. I'm not sure. But he eventually was cast in a show called The Monkees, where I always thought he was the lead singer. If you think about it, he was at the forefront. He was always there, but he mostly played tambourine and background. It was Mickey Dolenz who was mostly the lead singer, which always sort of surprised me in retrospect. And there's also that story that Charles Manson auditioned to be in the Monkees, and that is a physical impossibility. That the auditions were in 1965, I think. Manson was in prison at the time. And so he couldn't have done it. But Mickey Dolenz, I asked him about it. Mickey Dolenz said, no, I just said that as a joke in an interview one time. And then I met Davy Jones at one of those autograph shows. I did get to meet Mickey, Davy, and Peter Tork. And I had him autograph a monkey's drum skin for me. Mickey signed it, I'm a believer. Davy Jones wrote, he wrote, Charles Manson was not a monkey. And then Peter Tork, who was doing autographs for like 25, 30, $40. And then he says, oh, if you have a drum skin, that's going to be 75. I mean, I hate when people do that, but he did that. And he wrote on it on his own. I didn't prompt it. Manson didn't even audition, contrary to popular belief. So, and Davy Jones died of a heart attack very suddenly, actually. I think it was on his ranch, maybe with his, in the stables, I'm not quite sure, but he retired, I think, to Kentucky maybe, and he had horses. And I believe that's where he died suddenly of a heart attack. Dorothy. So Dorothy Stratton was a Playboy model who was Playmate of the Year in 1980. In fact, they made the movie Star 80 about her. She had a boyfriend. She was from Canada, and she had a boyfriend, Paul Snider, who sent pictures of her underage to Hugh Hefner, and he flew Dorothy, offered to fly her to America, to the Playboy Mansion, because he wanted to get her to pose nude for Playboy. And Paul Snider just, he went along, he tried to weasel his way into a lot of different things that Dorothy was involved in, because he wanted to be like the big cheese or the big honcho guy, and he wouldn't, and nobody wanted to talk to him. They wanted to talk to Dorothy because she was the goods. But he sort of glommed onto her because that was his way in to the Playboy Mansion, to all the parties. And they say that Paul Snider started the Chippendales. I don't know quite how that worked in there, but he started the whole idea of male strippers, like Playboy bunnies, wearing the collar and the cuffs like the bunnies did, except it was dudes. Anyway, she was trying to split up with Paul Snider because she was seeing Peter Bogdanovich, the director. It's like a Woody Allen thing. It's really odd because Snider was, he's a good-looking guy, and she dumped him. Well, he was an awful person. He was evil. I mean, he was nasty, abusive, horrible to her. So she went with Peter Bogdanovich, and then she was going to get him to sign divorce papers. And he said, "I'll meet you at your house." And he did go to her house, and then he took her into the bedroom and he tied her up and did horrible things to her, and eventually took a shotgun to her face and then shot himself in the head in that same room. And then Patty, I forget what her name is, I interviewed her once, the one who found the bodies, discovered them, and she was quite young too. Very, very sad. And when they made the movie Star 80 and they demonstrated the suicide murder, they actually went into that house and filmed inside that house, where Paul Snider's brother lived for a long time after the murders. But they actually filmed it in. Poor Dorothy. Steve McQueen. Well, Steve McQueen, a heartthrob, a hunk to a lot of people. I personally never saw it. I didn't get it. To me, didn't strike a chord with me in any way. But he was a sort of an action star, kind of. And he was, Bullet was his most famous movie, probably, where the famous car chase through San Francisco, which is fun to watch, because if you watch him driving through San Francisco and this long involved car scene, chase scene, they keep hitting curves, and I think they counted 5 hubcaps fell off one of the cars and stuff. But it's an iconic scene, and he was involved with Ali MacGraw. Ali MacGraw, the actress, was married to Robert Evans, the producer, and he was too tied up in his own business, and she started having an affair with Steve McQueen, and eventually left Robert Evans for Steve McQueen. And I do believe that Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen's footprints are together at Grauman's Chinese Theater. But Evans' book was really good. If you ever see The Kid Stays in the Picture, Robert Evans was a really good book. And Ali MacGraw, we met her one time. She did a Polaroid Swinger commercial, and we had her autograph Troy's Polaroid camera. She was like, I should be praying in front of that camera, because it made her as a model. Anyway, Steve McQueen got cancer. He went down to Mexico, and he was trying some experimental treatments, I think. I'm not sure exactly what it was, if it was holistic, or it was just they went there because the drugs were illegal in America. And but that is where he withered away. Did not go out gracefully, and he died in Mexico. I remember him in the Towering Inferno. In fact, there was that whole thing with Paul Newman and Steve McQueen getting into it in Towering Inferno, because one name didn't want to be above the other, and they wanted to be side by side. It'd be alphabetical. No, couldn't be. Anyway, Steve McQueen. Betty Page. Betty. What can I say about Betty Page? Betty Page was a model who really didn't become a huge name until she was much older. In the 50s, she did a lot of what was called, a kind of cheesecake. She had this dark hair, kind of, I don't know how you call that cut. It's quite common now to see it in a lot of women that are into like tiki stuff, kind of 40s looking. And she did these sort of almost dominatrix type modeling. Look her up; you'd know her face if you saw it. And then I don't know if she ever posed for Playboy, but they found her and she was living in a crappy little apartment in the valley, and she would come out of retirement. She wasn't a model anymore, but she came and started doing autograph signing and a couple of appearances here and there. Hugh Hefner kind of took her under his wing again. Hugh Hefner was, call him what you will about a lot of people. A lot of people do call him stuff, but Hugh Hefner did care for people. He cared about Hollywood. He's the guy that spearheaded the drive to have the Hollywood sign replaced when it was falling apart. And Hugh Hefner did buy Betty Page a grave at Westwood Cemetery because she died broke. She had some people doing I don't know if they were shady people, but doing the autographs for her at the end of her life. And she wouldn't be photographed after the last sort of 10 or 15 years of her life, but they would show her hands. I guess they were distinctive hands, I don't know, but autographing stuff. But Betty Page has become sort of an industry after the fact. But you'd know her if you saw her. Not S&M, but kind of kinky, sort of dominatrix-y, but not, kind of more lighthearted. And she, rest in peace, she's at Westwood Cemetery, courtesy, which it couldn't have been a cheap grave. We're talking Betty Page. Elizabeth Taylor. Gosh, I wish I could remember. I wish I could remember that quote about Elizabeth Taylor when she said, "I don't want to go out, with all pretty and my hair all nice up and saying, dying, looking like, I don't know what it was, looking prim and proper. She goes, I don't want to go out like 10 miles of bad road and, exhausted and falling apart. And she did. She lived her life. I mean, she was something else. She was friends with tons of people. She was even friends with like Pee Wee Herman and Rock Hudson and James Dean and Montgomery Clift and all gay. But and Roddy McDowell, she and Roddy McDowell were very, very close. And she's of course famous for her getting married so many times, but she said that she didn't sleep with people until she married them, and so I thought that was kind of an interesting, sort of a thing. I know that she had struggled with her weight. Joan Rivers got a resurgence in her career because of the Elizabeth Taylor fat jokes, and I remember one time we went garbage picking in Beverly Hills and was with my friend Steve Goldstein, and we picked Elizabeth Taylor's garbage. And we decided she didn't like broccoli, but Steve said it was an Entenmann's donut box that looked like it was licked clean. I asked, Carrie Fisher was someone I knew, and she told me, I always heard the story about Carrie Fisher pushing Elizabeth Taylor into a swimming pool. And it was for, it ended up in the papers. And she said, okay, Elizabeth was saying, push me in the pool, it'll be really funny. And Carrie's like, I'm not going to push you in the pool. And Elizabeth says, no, do it, it'll be really funny. And Elizabeth says, no, push me. And Carrie's like, she says to me, I can hear her plastic hip clicking as she's walking towards me. And she says, I'm not going to push her in the pool. Finally, she got fed up enough and Carrie Fisher pushed her in the pool, and it became a newsworthy moment. And I knew I heard about it because that's why I asked her about it. But Elizabeth Taylor had a pretty great sense of humor, I think, about things. And if you were click, click, click. That was really funny. Rodney Dangerfield. Boy. So Rodney Dangerfield was a comedian. He was an actor. I don't know if he was an actor, but he was in movies like Caddyshack, which they're all Rodney Dangerfield's jokes or like one-liners they were great, usually self-deprecating, but when he focused on someone else, it went to the bone. And he was famous for wearing a red tie because I know they gave out memorial booklets at his funeral that had cloth red ties on it. He was, what was the other one? Back to School was another one he did with Sally Kellerman. and who's like zero personality, Shelley Kellerman. We met her and talked with her for a little while, and it was like there was like nothing there. It's like talking to a paper plate. But anyway, Rodney Dangerfield was quite ill towards the end. I think he was Alzheimer's, I think. And there were times where they brought him out and he was photographed by the paparazzi, and there were like injuries to his face, and he looked terrible towards the end. And he eventually died, and his funeral was at Westwood Cemetery. And he is, it says on his grave, his catchphrase, I don't get any respect. I don't get no respect. I think that's what it says. Or did he say, there goes the neighborhood? Now I'm confused. Who said there goes the neighborhood? Maybe that's what it was. Yeah, There Goes the Neighborhood was Rodney Dangerfield's gravestone. And his oh gosh, Caddyshack was such a good movie. And, oh boy, 20 more seconds. Why don't I know more about Rodney Dangerfield? This is really funny. Caddyshack, Back to School. Oh, Back to School was filmed in the Halloween house. Did you ever see Back to School? The film where he's living in that movie is actually the Laurie Strode house where she was babysitting in the first Halloween movie, right off of Orange Grove and Sunset. Oh, Cass. So Cass Elliot, Mama Cass Elliot, was the godmother of Laurel Canyon. Her house was sort of the center of Laurel Canyon, where everyone was welcome and everyone hung out. You know, from Jim Morrison to Janis Joplin, she was visiting, to Crosby, Stills and Nash, to Joni Mitchell, to gosh, everybody, the Doors, the Monkees, they were all friends with Cass. In fact, there's great footage of Mickey Dolenz at Cass's house, and when Joni Mitchell was brought by David Crosby when she first came to Hollywood, to Los Angeles, at Cass's house. But she had an open door policy. She lived next door to Sid Croft of Sid and Marty Croft, and he used to party down there with her too. Manson was there too. Manson hung out. In fact, one of Cass's really sketchy boyfriends hung out with Manson. It wasn't a family member, but he was a dirty guy. I listened to Owen Elliott, Cass's daughter's book, and she didn't go into any of it in detail, just that Cass had a really scuzzy guy around her, and they urged her to get rid of him. Cass was quit the mamas and the papas. She was, they really say they fat shamed her, but she embraced that, because she was an overweight woman, and she embraced it too. Maybe she saw that as her means to an end. I don't know, but I would, there were jokes at her expense, but she embraced that. So I have a hard time saying fat shaming, but anyway, she was in London staying in an apartment that was owned by, I'm going to skip that part because I don't remember. And she had a heart attack. And she was very young. She had a heart attack in this apartment, in bed. She didn't choke on a ham sandwich. That's a lot of BS. And poor Cass, that is where I will say she's fat shamed, because they always make a mockery of her saying that she was fat shamed because of that. No, there was no ham sandwich, or if there was one, it was on her bedside. She wasn't eating a ham sandwich. It was a stupid coroner who made a comment to the press. Just starting to get worked up about that. Lucille Ball. So the redhead, Lucille Ball, who wasn't always a redhead, she was actually a beautiful blonde for a while when she was a chorus girl at the beginning of the movie. She was married to Desi Arnaz. They thought that they could do a show, a situation comedy about a woman who's married to a Cuban. The American television wouldn't sponsor it or wouldn't put it together. They wouldn't finance it. So she and Desi Arnaz bankrolled it themselves. Therefore, they owned the show, and they filmed the show, and they made a fortune on that show. It was really wise of her to do that. And Lucy was like one of the funniest people in America. Funny on paper. She wasn't funny like haha like in normal life. She always said that herself though. She was, she could tell an anecdote, but she wasn't as funny. She could interpret funny, but nothing off script was allowed when they were doing the I Love Lucy's or any of the other incarnations. If you went off script, Richard Burton goes on a tear about Lucy, about being a guest on the Lucy show with Elizabeth Taylor. It was a funny episode, but Richard Burton just goes on and on about really nasty about Lucy. It was interesting. Lucy and Desi Arnaz broke up. They owned Desi Lou Studios, although it's not where I Love Lucy was filmed. They split up. Lucy bought out Desi Arnaz. They bought the old RKO studios. She did. She produced Mission Impossible. She produced Star Trek. Star Trek. If it wasn't for Lucy, there would be no Star Trek. She eventually sold all of that, including her interest, I guess, in I Love Lucy, too. Made her very, very rich at the end. And her house on Roxbury Drive was, in fact, look at my YouTube video, because that house is still there, although it's been gutted. The house is technically still there. I did a whole thing about it, and there are pictures of when they were tearing it down, or tearing down quite a bit of it. And we own her sink from there. Someone asked me if I wanted Lucy's sink, and it's the sink that she used to have her hair dyed in. And so it has that dip in it where she would lay back and they'd dye her hair. And, well... Yeah. Jimmy Durante. Gosh, why that came up today too? Why the heck did Jimmy Durante come up today? Oh, I was reading about Johnny Carson talking to Burt Reynolds about impersonators, and he says, "Yeah, there's a Jimmy Durante one." I'm like, who's going to hire a Jimmy Durante lookalike? But Jimmy Durante had his own shtick too. It's a mad world. He's in that. He had his own Jimmy Durante show. His thing was hot cha cha cha, and he would say, "Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are." That was his tagline. Nobody knew who Mrs. Calabash was, but that's the way he'd always end his shows. And I remember that, not a very nice story about him. There's a really uncomfortable thing that he did with Anisha Jones from Family Affair, where they're on a show together. And he's like rubbing he had this huge nose, like he must have been an alcoholic, but this massive sort of red, bloated nose. And he was like rubbing it against Anisha Jones's face. It was really uncomfortable. And I know that he was one that sort of hung out at the Playboy Mansion too. Or, I don't know if he hung out there, but I did know a Playboy bunny who didn't have anything good to say about him. And actually my friend Virginia Graham, who was the woman who turned on, Susan Atkins in, I think that, was it her that told me that? Or maybe the Playboy bottle did that when they were going, this is such a bad story. I don't even wish I have to. There was a sex exchange for some reason, maybe financial, I don't know, somehow. And they say that she told me that Jimmy Durante pulled his pants down and started crying. And it's like, for whatever reason, that was a story that stuck with me. First person, it wasn't something that, I read in a book somewhere. It was somebody it happened to, so I heard it from that person directly. But Jimmy Durante is buried in Holy Cross Cemetery, not far from Jackie Coogan, and Sharon Tate's over there, and Rita Hayworth, and it's beautiful, beautiful cemetery. And that's that. I'm getting better, aren't I? I'm filling in the time. I am filling in the time. I feel a little bad about the Jimmy Durante story, but I'm not, I'm just repeating it. It's not my story, but it was something that was told to me. And I do repeat stories that are interesting. So I didn't make it up. So I guess that's it. So Death Roulette number 8, signing off. Remember, all these stories are on findadeath.com. If you choose to support the page, down below, there is a Patreon link. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, you get exclusive content. You get an exclusive question and answer thing, and I answer a lot of questions directly. Always a great way to communicate with me, and stuff that I don't post publicly, I will post on the Patreon page. Thank you guys who do subscribe to this channel. If you don't, please do. If you please like it, because it matters if you like these videos, because YouTube, it matters to them. And it matters to me too. So thank you very much. Feel free to comment, because I will probably see it and maybe respond if I can. But join the Patreon page if you can. So anyway, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your attention. And until next time.
You heard me.